You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And if you are watching on YouTube, this will be an audio-only podcast today. We'll have another audio-only podcast tomorrow as I'm completing my Mets road trip, going throughout the Mets farm system. Tomorrow will be Syracuse, and then I'll be heading home back to my normal studio there that you're used to watching if you follow our YouTube page. On today's show, we get to celebrate the end of the Robinson Cano era. And yes, the Mets lost a game, and I'll talk about that in the second segment, and I'll also preview the rest of this series in the third segment. But we have to open the show today talking about the glorious news that Steve Cohen decided to swallow all that cash and get the 39-year-old, two-time PED suspended Cano off this roster. I'll get into all of that in just a minute, but first, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter, @FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. And on Just Baseball, you can read my thoughts on the Robinson Cano DFA, as I published that article earlier on today. This is exactly what had to happen. It's just that simple. I went through the entire argument of it on yesterday's show. Robinson Cano did not serve a function in this roster anymore. All he technically could bring is a left-handed power bat. But what he was doing is he was making Dominic Smith a lot less effective because he was cutting his playing time in half, and Dominic Smith has a much better chance to break out, as you saw the 4-hit game, and actually be an above-average offensive player for this Mets team than Robinson Cano. It's just that simple. Dom's 26, Cano is 39. 13 years ago, you take Cano all day long. But now, with where he's at in his career, on the other side of 2 PED suspensions, it made no sense to keep him. And you know what? All this talk about him being a teammate and a leader and all that, if he was such a great teammate, he would have accepted an assignment to Syracuse because he would have known it was best for the team. If he was really such a great teammate who was pulling for the Mets to win and to be part of a World Series champion, if he was really that all in, he would have said, you know what? All right, send me to Syracuse. Because these other guys, they're maybe in better shape than me right now. They're maybe in better midseason form. Send me to Syracuse where I can play every day, and I'll show you, and I'll be back in the big leagues. If Robinson Cano believed in himself, and if he believed in the Mets as a team that he wanted to be a part of, that's an assignment he would have taken. He said, you know what, fine. Send me to Syracuse. But it doesn't seem like he's going to do that, and he's going to explore the market with his agent, Bernie Van Wagenen. Isn't that funny? They're going to try to find an opportunity for him. You know what? Maybe there's a role for him. Last year, Albert Pujols, he gets cut. Everyone thinks his career's over. Played well enough with the Dodgers that he just got another opportunity to play again this year with the Cardinals. So maybe that's still out there for Cano. But the Mets were not the team to continue to give him opportunities because they're simply too good. And Dominic Smith is the much better option right now. As I talked about yesterday, so Travis Jankowski made more sense to serve a role in this team as a guy who can run the bases really well, be a late inning defensive replacement, and also a guy who's getting on base at a 400 clip this year. And they needed Guillorme on this team as the backup, utility infielder. And J.D. Davis, while he's not quite hitting yet, at least serves a different function than Cano as a right-handed power bat off the bench. So I think we already know that this was the only baseball decision to make, and I'm thrilled that they made it. But it also shows you the drastic difference from where the Mets were to where the Mets are. Because when Jeff Wilpon was running the New York Mets, they hired Bernie Van Wagenen because he told them that they could win now. And Brodie Van Wagenen's big plan to win now was to address second base, a position that Jeff McNeil had already won as a rookie, where he was great in 2018. And instead of just letting McNeil stay at the position, you know what he did? He traded for his former client, who he believed could still move the needle and help the 2019 Mets. And Cano did not hold up his end of the bargain. Arguably, the two players he got in the trade are the two biggest reasons the 2019 Mets don't make the playoffs. And Robinson Cano and Edwin Diaz. And it's great to still have Diaz now. And I know that Jared Kelenic has not got off to the greatest of starts. And if you want to dismiss the Justin Dunn part of that trade, here's the reality. At the time, those two prospects had way more value than simply picking up a closer and taking on Robinson Cano's contract, because Robinson Cano's contract was a negative value asset. And that was who was running the Mets. And that's why it took a full year to climb out of the way that this franchise was previously run for Steve Cohen to have finally got the right people in place, got the right GM in Billy Epler, got the right manager in Buck Showalter, spent the money to bring in a Max Scherzer, and suddenly you're looking at a Mets team that is completely different in every single way from that team in 2019 that made that mistake of a trade. And now you're able to outlive that mistake and contend in this window because you have a $300 million payroll. And because you're now making smart baseball decisions, like not trying to hang on to Robinson Cano just because he's getting paid, and you're just letting him go. Because, as I said yesterday, the baseball argument, there was no logical reason to keep Cano other than the contract. And when you have Steve Cohen, the contract doesn't matter. And that's the beauty of all this. So I look at where the Mets are, and I will thank Brodie Van Wagenen for one thing. He put Jeff McNeil in that bad spot where he had to learn the outfield, and now his versatility has become a great asset for this Mets team. So that's the only positive thing I could say about all of that, because simply put, the Mets could have taken all the money they spent on that deal. They could have taken the prospect capital that they had, and they could have won a World Series 2 years earlier, maybe 3 years earlier. But instead, they had to take the long, winding road thanks to a terribly run organization with the last regime. But luckily, things are much better now. And even though the Mets lost tonight, it's still a night for celebration because Cano's no longer a Met. And to me, that's the best news that's going to come out of this week. So rejoice, Mets fans. You no longer have to watch Robinson Cano not hustle to first base. You no longer have to watch Robinson Cano move like a glacier out at second base defensively. And most importantly, you no longer have to watch him strike out in like 70% of his at-bats. If he's not striking out, he's rolling the ball over. You don't have to see that anymore either. So it's a fantastic day. I will, though, discuss the loss and preview the rest of the series. We're going to get to all of that. But first, with spring in the air, it is time for renewal and growth, personally and professionally. And as your small business grows, LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions makes it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonmlb. That's linkedin.com/lockedonmlb to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. BetOnline.net is your #1 source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So to discuss this Mets game tonight, it was just not their night, which sounds really simple and maybe a little bit of lazy analysis, but I can't critique a team who has played as well as the Mets for dropping a game because they're not going to win them all. And it's not like the Mets weren't competitive in this game. The Braves clearly got up for this one, as they should. They were coming into town to face the Mets for the first time. And there's still a lot of talented players on that roster. And just because they stumbled out of the gate, don't expect the Braves to stay down for too long. They're still the second best team in this division. You see how I said that? The second best team. But they are. They're a more complete team than the Marlins. The Marlins are hot right now. I was high on the Marlins coming into the year. I am higher on the Marlins at this moment than I am on the Phillies. At the same time, though, I think those two teams belong in a different tier that's going to be competing for the wild card. And I think the Braves are going to compete, and they're going to push the Mets in this division at some point. This is why it was good to get a cushion early. If the Mets go out and get swept in the doubleheader tomorrow, then we'll start to raise some alarm bells, and we'll start to freak out a little bit. We'll react. But dropping the first game of this series, to me, it's not too significant. And the Mets, again, they competed in this game. They had their opportunities early. They actually took a lead. In the second inning, Starling Marte once again creating a run with his speed. He doubles, then he goes to third on a sacrifice fly off the bat of Jeff McNeil, and then he scores on a wild pitch. And you could say, I mean, what did his speed really do to make that wild pitch happen? Anybody could have scored on that wild pitch. True. But what I will say is there is something different in a pitcher's mind when you have a guy like Starling Marte standing 90 feet away. And just the thought of, I better not throw a wild pitch, that can sometimes speak it into existence just because it's out there. This is coming from someone who used to pitch. Now, when there was someone with speed on the bases, you could lie and say you just focus on the catcher and the glove. That's not the case. You notice that speed that is on the bases, particularly when it's standing on third base and you're a right-handed pitcher and you're just looking right at him. Now I just said right-handed, and Fried, of course, is a lefty. So I maybe ruin my argument a little bit with that because I was talking about my personal experience, but even for a Fried, you do think about what's going on behind you with all that speed, and you do think, I better make sure that I'm spot on here, and I think that results in more of those wild pitches. I think Jose Reyes scored a lot of runs of wild pitches, not just because of his speed, but because of that threat that he put into the hearts of the pitchers that were going against him. So I think Marte, once again, is just a player that does stuff that isn't going to show up on the box score more than just the run itself. He just creates things. So that's what happened to get the early lead. Mark Canha hit his first home run as a Met. That gave them a 2-0 lead, but that was all the runs the Mets would score. They had a bases loaded chance. They didn't come through there. The Braves, their offense got going. Austin Riley hit a homer in the fourth, his 7th of the year. Austin Riley is a really good player. And then Travis d'Arnaud killed you. It's just that simple. He had 2 different RBI doubles late, drove in 3. They got another run on a sacrifice fly, but the bottom line is d'Arnaud killed the Mets again, as former Mets tend to do. And they lose the game 5-2. And you look at Chris Bass's performance and you say, oh, he wasn't as good as he's been. He gave up 3 runs. He got you through 7. He had 8 strikeouts to 1 walk. Gave up 6 hits. It's a quality start. So I wouldn't read too much into his performance. I thought he threw the ball pretty well. It's just a good team that he was going up against that hit some tough pitches. And then Trevor May would be the one that I actually would be concerned about because he gave up 2 more runs. His ERA is now 8.64 on the season. And after the game, he said just physically he still doesn't feel right. And I'm not concerned about May when he's healthy because I think Trevor May is a great professional. He takes care of his body the right way. I think he really is at a stage of his career. If you've watched some of his YouTube videos where he sort of walks through his day and you just kind of get a sense of who Trevor May is as an athlete, he's doing everything he can to perform. And I'm not going to fault the guy when the results don't show up, especially if there is some health concerns right now with that arm that's just not completely where he wants it to be. And if that's the case, a hurt Trevor May is going to hurt this Mets team. They got to put him on the IL and try to clean up whatever injury he has, and hopefully somebody else can step up. Adam Ottavino is certainly making the case for more high-leverage situations. He struck out the side in his inning tonight. He's looked really good. Drew Smith has looked really good. Edwin Diaz obviously has looked great. And I think Seth Lugo is turning a corner. I think he's showing more positives than negatives. I think Lugo always been a little bit of a slow starter. I think Lugo is going to round it to midseason form right about now. So I'm not overly concerned about the Mets bullpen if Trevor May is lost for a bit. I'd be very concerned, though, if we find it's a significant injury. Because if they don't have Trevor May come playoff time, that just increases the need to potentially add an arm at the deadline. But I think that's something that's likely to be on the Mets' priority list no matter what happens with May. Anyway, what I want to do now is preview what is left in this series. We got a doubleheader to watch, so that's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to get to that in a minute. But first, this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So why endure the often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter is just ordering your parts on their computer using only the brand their warehouse happens to carry, when instead you can go to rockauto.com, shop from hundreds of manufacturers, save 30%, 50%, maybe even 100% more for those exact same amount of parts that you would get at the chain store or a car dealership. RockAuto.com is a family business that has been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto parts needs at RockAuto.com. See all the parts available for your car or truck, and make sure you write Locked On in their How'd You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliable low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. All right, so the good thing is the Mets have 3 more chances to get back at the Braves for taking Game 1 at their ballpark. First game will be played at 3:10 today, single admission doubleheader. Charlie Morton versus TBD. And Game 2 will be Kyle Wright versus TBD. The Mets have not announced who will be pitching these games, although we do know that Carlos Carrasco and David Peterson will be taking the ball. We just don't know which one will be taking the ball first. We'll talk, though, about the Braves. You have Morton. A 7 ERA on this season. He's washed, right? I don't think so. I think Charlie Morton's going to be just fine. And honestly, that almost scares me more than Kyle Wright and his 1.13 ERA. Because I look at Kyle Wright and I think, well, really good young pitcher. Someone who I do believe can be this level of good. 34 strikeouts, nothing to sneeze at there. But a 1.13 ERA is hard to sustain. I think the Mets have a really good lineup. Kind of same thing in the opposite direction with Charlie Morton. A pitcher as good as Charlie Morton, a 7 ERA seems like one that is bound to come down, and that could be at the hands of the Mets, where maybe Morton goes out and twirls 7 innings of 1-run ball, and you're really behind the 8 ball. If you lose that first game and you already are down 2-0 in the series, that's not a good position to be in. So I hope the Mets can go out and win Game 1 because of that. I honestly would not be surprised if we saw Carlos Carrasco pitch that first game just to try to get it. Carrasco is a better option than Peterson, who did get roughed up in his one start in Syracuse. I'm not sure how much we should read into that, but that's definitely a concern, and you're calling him back up here. Hopefully, Peterson can pitch the same way he pitched prior to being sent down, where he was excellent. But maybe the Mets go Carrasco first to just get a win, and then Game 2, you go Peterson and bullpen. But they also could look at the potential of going Peterson first and maybe trying to steal that one. And then if they can steal that one, then Carrasco goes against Wright. Also, if they're trying to line up the best pitcher for the matchup, Kyle Wright has been better than Morton, so that could be the argument for going Carrasco there. The bottom line is there's no reason to doubt this Mets team against either of these guys. They have been productive against a lot of good pitching at points this season. I think they can go out and they can win one of these games, or they can win both. And if you sweep this doubleheader, you're right back in the driver's seat of this series. But at least you have to get one in that doubleheader so that you can escape on Wednesday with a series split, if nothing better. because the last thing you want is to lose a 4-game series to the Braves and give them life again in this NL East race. Right now, after taking this game, let me give you an updated look at the standings as I look it up. I have yet to check exactly where the Braves stand. They're now 11-13. Mets 16-8. So the Braves are still 5 games back. If you lose 2 tomorrow, now you're going to be worried. Now suddenly they're in sniffing distance of you, getting a little bit closer. You got to at least split this series. End up no worse than you were coming into it in relation to the Braves. And then you try to move on and do a little bit better against the Phillies in Philly starting on Thursday. But if I did not, I don't believe I did mention the pitching matchup on Wednesday. For the final game of the series, a day game on Wednesday, it will be Ian Anderson versus Tyler McGoat, Big Drippin', Tyler McGill, who's coming off the combined 5 strong no-hit innings in that game against Philly. It'll be good to see him go up against this Braves team for the first time this year. I believe he debuted against the Braves, if I'm not mistaken, last year and pitched very well. So we could see McGill go out and command this lineup, but that's definitely a tough lineup to face. So hopefully the Mets put him in a position where he can win a series. But if you end up looking to split a series with McGill on the mound against Ian Anderson, I feel pretty good about the Mets' chances. Ian Anderson has not gotten off to a great start this year. He was outstanding for the Braves last year, but he has a 4.66 ERA. It's kind of interesting how him and Kyle Wright have sort of switched places for this Atlanta Braves team. But the bottom line is, this is, even with the record, one of the best teams the Mets have faced this year. Outside of the Giants, you can make an argument still that the Braves are the second best team that the Mets have seen all season. I know that they just went up against the Cardinals. The Cardinals are a good team as well, but you're talking about the reigning World Series champs, and you're looking at them now with Acuna in the lineup as well. It's a deep team, it's a loaded team, and it's a team that is not going to be under 500 for very long. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, @Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show, @Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to catch up on everything going on in Major League Baseball. You can follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.